If you're over 60 and your walking isn't fixing your weak glutes, it's not because you're lazy, it's because walking doesn't activate the glutes the way you think it does. And today I'm going to show you a simple sitting exercise that can actually wake them back up, backed by science, safe for your joints. And surprisingly, more effective than just walking. Most people over 60 have been told the same simple advice over and over again: just walk more. Walk for your heart, walk for your joints, walk for your strength, walk to stay young. And on the surface, it sounds logical, even harmless. Walking feels natural, it feels safe, it feels like something humans were designed to do. But here's the uncomfortable truth that almost no one talks about. For millions of older adults, walking is no longer rebuilding strength. It's quietly reinforcing weakness. And the reason has nothing to do with motivation, laziness, or aging itself. It has everything to do with how the human body adapts when key muscles shut down. By the time you reach your 60s, your glute muscles, the largest and most powerful muscles in your body, have often been inactive for decades. Not because you stopped moving, but because modern life trained them to switch off. Prolonged sitting changes muscle firing patterns at the neurological level. Research published in the Journal of Applied Physiology shows that extended sitting reduces gluteal activation even during movement afterward. That means when you stand up and walk, the muscles that are supposed to drive your stride are already asleep. Your body doesn't wait for them to wake up. It finds shortcuts. Those shortcuts usually come from the knees and the lower back. This is why studies consistently show higher rates of knee osteoarthritis and lumbar spine degeneration in adults who rely heavily on walking as their primary exercise but lack hip strength. The glutes are designed to extend the hip, stabilize the pelvis, and absorb force with every step. When they're weak, the force has to go somewhere else. Walking doesn't fix that problem. It often magnifies it. Electromyography studies, tests that measure how much a muscle actually fires, reveal a shocking fact. In older adults with shortened stride length, glute activation during walking can drop below 20% of maximal voluntary contraction. That's not training, that's barely maintenance. In comparison, simple isometric glute contractions performed while seated can exceed double that activation without any joint impact. The muscle doesn't respond to movement alone. It responds to intent. And intent is exactly what walking lacks once compensations take over. When glutes are inhibited, the nervous system stops prioritizing them. This phenomenon, known as arthrogenic muscle inhibition, is well documented in aging populations. The brain literally reduces its signal to the muscle to protect the joints. The tragedy is that the protection creates a vicious cycle. Weak glutes lead to unstable hips. Unstable hips lead to shorter steps. Shorter steps further reduce glute activation, and the person keeps walking, wondering why nothing is improving. What makes this especially dangerous is how subtle it feels. There's no sharp pain at first, just stiffness, a little imbalance, difficulty standing up from a chair, a slight forward lean when walking. These are often dismissed as normal aging, yet longitudinal studies show they are early predictors of falls, loss of independence, and even increased mortality. One study in the British Medical Journal found that gait speed and stride length are stronger predictors of lifespan than many cardiovascular markers in older adults, and glute strength plays a central role in both. The fitness industry rarely addresses this because walking is easy to recommend. It doesn't scare people, it doesn't require explanation, but simplicity doesn't equal effectiveness. In fact, for glute recovery, walking can be misleading. It gives the illusion of activity without restoring the missing link, neuromuscular control. Muscles don't weaken just because they shrink. They weaken because the brain stops talking to them. This is why many people walk every day for years and still struggle with stairs, balance, or rising from the floor. Their cardiovascular system adapts, their joints endure, but their glutes never come back online. The body becomes efficient at dysfunction, and efficiency in this case is the enemy. There's also a metabolic cost to this pattern. The glutes are massive glucose sinks. When they're inactive, insulin sensitivity drops. Research in diabetologia shows that reduced large muscle activation contributes to worsening blood sugar control with age, even in physically active individuals. Walking without glute engagement doesn't challenge these muscles enough to create meaningful metabolic demand. So despite staying active, the body slowly loses its ability to regulate energy. Balance suffers as well. The glutes are primary stabilizers during single leg stance, which occurs every time you take a step. If they're not firing, balance shifts to smaller, less capable muscles. This is why fall risk remains high even among older adults who walk daily. A study in Age and Aging found that targeted hip strengthening reduced fall risk significantly more than walking programs alone. The difference wasn't movement, it was muscle activation. Perhaps the most unsettling fact is this: the body learns what you repeatedly do. If you walk with poor glute engagement, you're training your body to move that way permanently. Neural pathways strengthen with repetition. The longer this pattern continues, the harder it becomes to reverse. That's why simply walking more often leads to diminishing returns. You're reinforcing the very pattern that caused the weakness. This doesn't mean walking is bad, it means walking is incomplete. Without first restoring glute activation, walking becomes a passenger activity rather than a driver of strength. The engine is off and the wheels are still turning. The real solution isn't more movement, it's better signaling. Before the body can move well, it has to remember how to fire correctly. That's where intentional low-load activation becomes transformative, especially for aging nervous systems. Studies show that isometric contractions improve motor unit recruitment and cortical activation even in adults over 70. In other words, the brain can relearn at any age if the signal is clear enough. The myth that walking alone is enough has cost millions of older adults their strength without them ever realizing why. It's not that they didn't try, it's that they were given incomplete information. The body doesn't decline because it moves less. It declines because it forgets how to move correctly. And once you understand that, everything changes, because strength doesn't start with steps. It starts with awakening the muscles that were meant to carry you for life. What most people never realize is that the real damage doesn't begin when movement stops. It begins when the body adapts to sitting as its default state. Sitting doesn't just rest your muscles, it rewires them. And over time, it convinces your nervous system that certain muscles are no longer essential for survival. Among the first to be silenced are the glutes, the largest, most powerful muscles you have, the muscles that once allowed humans to stand upright, sprint, climb, and survive. When they shut down, the consequences ripple through the entire body. Prolonged sitting places the hips in constant flexion, shortening the hip flexors and lengthening the glutes. But the real problem isn't length, it's communication. Research in neuromuscular physiology shows that muscles held in a lengthened, inactive position for long periods experience reduced motor neuron excitability. In plain terms, the brain stops sending strong signals to them. This phenomenon has been observed in as little as 2 hours of uninterrupted sitting, according to studies published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology. 2 hours, not decades, not years, just one afternoon. As this pattern repeats day after day, the nervous system begins to reclassify the glutes as optional. The body always chooses efficiency over strength. If a muscle isn't needed to complete a task, the brain conserves energy by down-regulating it. Standing up, walking, climbing stairs, these movements still happen, but the workload quietly shifts to smaller, less suited muscles. The lower back extends the hip instead of the glutes. The knees absorb force they were never designed to handle. The body keeps functioning, but at a cost that compounds silently. This is why glute weakness rarely announces itself with immediate pain. Instead, it shows up as stiffness when you wake up, as instability when you turn, as fatigue after short walks, as that unsettling feeling of being off balance without knowing why. These are not random sensations, they are early warning signals. Research in the journals of gerontology shows that decreased hip extension strength is strongly associated with loss of functional independence in older adults. Not heart disease, not cholesterol, hip strength. What makes sitting so dangerous is not that it feels harmful, but that it feels normal. Humans are adaptable to a fault. When sitting becomes the dominant posture, the body remodels itself around it. Muscle fibers change type. Fast, powerful fibers are replaced with slower, weaker ones. Tendons lose stiffness. Bone density decreases around the hips. Even the sensory receptors in the joints become less responsive. A study in Nature Reviews Neuroscience explains that reduced sensory input leads to poorer motor output. When you don't load a joint properly, the brain loses awareness of where the body is in space. This loss of awareness is devastating for balance. The glutes play a central role in pelvic stability, especially during single leg stance. Every step you take is a controlled fall caught by the glutes. When they're inactive, the brain struggles to stabilize the pelvis. Balance becomes reactive instead of proactive. This is why falls often happen during simple tasks like turning, reaching, or stepping off a curb. The system meant to protect you no longer fires in time. The statistics are chilling. Falls are the leading cause of injury-related death in adults over 65. According to the CDC, 1 in 4 older adults falls each year, and many of those falls occur in people who consider themselves active. Activity alone does not protect you if the wrong muscles are doing the work. Sitting-induced glute inhibition sets the stage for these events long before the fall happens. There is also a deep metabolic consequence that rarely gets discussed. The glutes are among the most metabolically active muscles in the body. When they contract forcefully, they act as massive glucose sinks, pulling sugar out of the bloodstream. When they're inactive, blood sugar regulation suffers. Studies in diabetes care show that prolonged sitting impairs insulin sensitivity even in individuals who exercise regularly. This means you can walk every day and still experience worsening metabolic health if large muscle groups remain underutilized. Sitting doesn't just weaken the body, it ages it. Telomere length, a marker of cellular aging, has been shown to correlate with sedentary time independent of exercise. In other words, you cannot fully undo the effects of sitting by exercising later. The body remembers the dominant signal, and for many older adults, that signal has been inactivity at the hip for decades. Perhaps the most alarming effect is how sitting alters posture and breathing. When the pelvis loses stability, the spine compensates by collapsing forward. This forward posture restricts diaphragmatic movement, reducing oxygen efficiency. Reduced oxygen delivery affects everything from cognitive function to endurance. Research in Chest Journal demonstrates that posture alone can significantly alter lung capacity. Weak glutes lead to poor posture. Poor posture leads to compromised breathing. The chain reaction is relentless, and yet none of this is irreversible. The nervous system is plastic. It can change even late in life, but it only responds to clear signals. Passive movement doesn't send a strong enough message. Walking with inactive glutes tells the brain that the current strategy is acceptable. Sitting without intentional activation reinforces silence. The body adapts to whatever you repeatedly show it. The tragedy is not that people are sitting, it's that they're sitting without purpose. Sitting has become a default state rather than a strategic position, but when used intentionally, it can become the starting point for recovery instead of decline. Because before a muscle can grow stronger, it must be hurt again. The real problem isn't age. It isn't lack of effort. It isn't even lack of movement. The real problem is that the body has forgotten how to turn on the muscles that once carried it effortlessly through life. And until that signal is restored, no amount of walking will bring them back. Because decline doesn't happen when you stop moving. It happens when the muscles that matter most go silent, and no one tells you why. If you're over 60 and your walking isn't fixing your weak glutes, it's not because you're lazy, it's because walking doesn't activate the glutes the way you think it does. And today I'm going to show you a simple sitting exercise that can actually wake them back up, backed by science, safe for your joints, and surprisingly more effective than just walking.